So let me describe a rifle, a gun. And I want to describe a rifle or a gun because of a certain feature that a gun possesses. So if I were describing a rifle to you and you really didn't know what a rifle looked like or was like, I'd say it has a steel barrel. And this barrel is to receive a bullet on one end and discharge the bullet at the other end. A rifle has a stock to rest against the shoulder. It has a sight on top of the barrel to aim. It has a chamber to receive a bullet or whatever. There are all kinds of parts and pieces that come together to make this rifle. But there is one thing on this rifle, one thing that is indispensable. What is that?
Trigger.
The trigger. Thank you. Thank you. The trigger. The rifle's not going to do anything until the trigger is pulled. That is true in 1,000 different ways spiritually. Ellen White talked about cause and effect. That's the pulling of a trigger. You've got a cause. The effect is what follows when you pull the trigger. And pulling the trigger is just a matter of speech. We don't have to have a gun. We don't have to have a rifle. We don't have to have some understanding of this relationship between cause and effect. The trigger event happens in earthquakes that we were looking at here. That's what they're saying when they say, well, we've got a flurry of quakes, shakes, and the more the jiggle is going on, the more concerned we are that something larger is on the way. That's what it says. And they're not talking about Bible. They're not predicting, the end of the world. They're just saying that there's enough evidence to say something could and may be about to happen. A trigger event. So I want to talk to you about trigger events in the spiritual realm and in the physical realm. I think you'll be interested. The first trigger event that I want to point to happened in the Garden of Eden. Things were normal. Things were okay. No bullets were flying. But something happened. Tell me, what was the trigger event that changed not only the relationship of people and God in this garden, but has affected millions and billions of human beings from that one choice or decision or trigger event? Just one word, one act, one event. And look at the consequences. And they're still going on. So I would say that what took place in the garden was, quotes, a trigger event. It set into motion a whole series of consequences and other things that are with us to this day. That was a trigger event. Can you think of other trigger events in the early Old Testament portions? Didn't take you long to get to the flood. Was the flood a trigger event? Was the flood the trigger? Or just the consequence? But there was a moment when all of the energy that sin brought to us was let loose in the flood. Trigger event. A trigger event, by our own reasoning and definition, would be something that changes not only history, but changes the circumstances of everybody on the rock, whether they know it or not, whether they know what's coming next or not. Things are set into motion, and sooner or later they are going to bear a terrible harvest. So there was the decision in the garden. That was a trigger event. We call that history. That's in the past. It actually occurred, we believe, because we believe the Bible. So what would be another trigger event in Old Testament record? Thank you, sir. Something happened in the heavens overhead, and something happened down here as a consequence. And God said, this is where you're going to start counting time. Your time, my time. And so what happened at the Exodus? We say, oh, there were plagues and whatever. Yes, it was Passover. It was a flyby. And God said, you're going to start counting from that moment. That's where you start your calendar, right there. Was it a consequential event? In other words, has it affected the whole planet? Is the Exodus a reality, whether people like it, believe it, are disgusted with the idea? Is the Exodus a reality in history? Is the Exodus a reality on the planet? Is there evidence today that there was an Exodus way back there? Yes. Still going on. The Exodus was a trigger event, but there was a flyby that triggered the trigger event. So I would like to suggest that we could go through the Bible as a record, as a historical record, except for those portions that are prophetic. Oh, we're going to talk about the prophetic portions in a moment. Because I believe, and I believe the Bible suggests, and certainly Ellen White says, that there are events ahead of us that will be trigger events, cause and effect. Well, we could go through the Old Testament. We could find all kinds of things. There's a space between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and in that space, Jesus came from heaven. You listening? Would you consider that a trigger event? I would. It's not the same as the flood. It's not the same, but it's a trigger event. Are the consequences of His coming still with us down here 2,000 years down the historical trail? And the answer is yes. It was truly, truly a trigger event. And the consequences are still with us. Still with us. Why? Because there are people who still have not made a choice in accordance with heaven. See, God gave us and our parents, in and through our parents, God gave us a choice to serve Him or not, to obey Him or not, to believe Him or not. God gave us a choice in our parents. Ooh. Sometimes I think, I wish He hadn't done that. But who's to say what choice I would have made or you would have made, just like our parents were making choices? And did they have enough information to make a real intelligent choice? Yes and no. The intelligent choice would have been, well, I don't understand everything, but I believe God, and I believe God is good. And I believe that He is deserving of my respectful obedience. Well, we're way past all of that. We are waiting for a series of trigger events on the planet. This is according to the Adventist version of the end. A series of prophetic triggers that are going to open the door to the end or close the door at the end. So let me just borrow a piece of chalk here for a moment. Where did I put you? And let's see if we can make simple sense. The garden, the flood, the Exodus, and was this Old Testament or New Testament? The answer is yes. This is the bridge between history and prophecy. Prophecy is what God promises through the prophets will yet become reality. This is history. What we want is future instruction. What we want is future detail. What we want is a better and more complete understanding of where we are on the calendar. We're talking about prophetic calendar. Where we are and who we are and what we can expect down the road. Our planet is changing. Many believe that very dark days are ahead for all of it. This is not a religious document. But it is. They just don't know it. They don't understand it. They don't comprehend it. They don't understand that this planet is wearing out. The energy that was put into the creation event on this rock is running out. The energy is dropping. And Ellen White says it simply, with every change of generation, every succeeding generation, people become weaker, less capable mentally, intellectually. The bodies are more easily diseased, on and on and on and on. See, we're somewhere nearer the end than the beginning of this trigger process. So what could we look for? I'm going to appeal to the Bible. I'm going to appeal to Ellen White. I'm going to appeal to reason, sensibility, and just looking and listening and following the world, what they're saying, how they're behaving. We're headed for a financial trigger, an economic trigger. There's something that is going to happen or is predicted to happen. And Ellen White says it in simple terms, we're waiting for national ruin. When all are looking forward to many years of worldly prosperity, suddenly as the lightning flashes from the heavens will come the end of their bright visions and delusive hopes. Some trigger event is on the way. What exactly will it be? Don't know. I can guess, you can guess, we can guess. There are plenty of financial brains out there who are guessing, oh, we're going to have a recession within 90 days with whatever. Oh, we're going to have a depression within the next 3 years. Well, we're all playing the guessing game. But I do not believe that prophecy is a guessing game. I believe that God is telling us through the prophets and in His Word and through events on the planet that things are changing and darker days are ahead, it says. Is that 30 days away? Is that 90 days away? So let me tell you where I think the next trigger event, prophetic trigger event, will possibly occur. I can't tell you the day and the hour. I can't tell you the week and the month. I can't tell you the year. I can only tell you that there's a lot of interesting chatter going on out there. And if you listen to all the different voices and extract what you can that's reasonable and scriptural and prophetic, we're near some trigger event. Some trigger is on the way. It's coming. Whether it's earthquake jello on the rock that's shaky, but there's something on the way. About 45 or 50 years ago, in my own personal study, I found in the prophetic portions of the book of Daniel more than a suggestion that modern day Iran, that's Persia of old, modern day Iran, is going to be a troublemaker. That's clear in the book of Daniel. All you have to do is know who the Persians are, who they were and who they are. And when we see them behaving as they are behaving, and we read the description of how they will behave, we say, whoa, there's a trigger event somewhere just ahead. Now it's pictured in Daniel as two horns, one horn higher than the other, and the higher horn comes up last. So there was Iraq and Iran after the first, what did we call that, desert storm? And the next one includes Iran because the second higher horn came up after desert storm, not before, after. And it has been a troubling and troublesome since. Now there's a problem that is taking place as we gather right here this morning. And Iran has built and now commands a fleet of small craft. One record says 150, one says 350, I don't know. But we have satellite imagery, and we know that they have this small craft gunship fleet. And things have grown more menacing because they have developed missiles that they can fire from these small craft and sink an aircraft carrier. Are you listening? And you say, well, that's all right. We can shoot and we can take care of business. Well, we have right now hordes of human beings who are rushing our southern border. They are overcoming the police, the border patrol, the fences, everything. You just put enough people going at the same time, and we cannot defend ourselves, not adequately. We can with machine guns, but oh, heaven help us if we try that. Now, let's get 150 to 350 of these small craft, and each one has one weapon on board that can sink an entire battle group. And it's not even a nuclear weapon. So here they are, 150 to 350 of them rushing us. And yes, we can shoot, and yes, we can say, bang, you're gone, and bang, you're gone. But you're not going to kill 350 before the damage is done. There is a potential trigger event looming in front of us right now. It's in the news. You're not hearing anything about it. because you would be stirring up, you would be beating the drums of war, you would be encouraging war. So quietly, we are using our satellites and we're using our drones and we're using whatever, and we are warning Iran, don't even think about it. And the Iranians could not care less what we say, what we think, or what we do. They couldn't care less. Now, why or how could this serve as a trigger event? Come on. In the book of Daniel, how could this serve as a trigger event? A trigger event is larger than a little boat firing a missile at another boat. What is the potential in all of this? In the book of Daniel, it says that this little horn, this Persian little horn, is going to provoke a power from the west. A power. And it has a notable horn. What is that? That's a large horn of strength, a notable horn of strength. And he is going to become angered and infuriated with the power that is pushing and provoking and threatening and will do whatever, whether it's against Israel or against us or against both of us. They're going to do something. And they're threatening this week. So 4 days ago, the president invited Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel, to come and appear with him in the cabinet, in the White House, for the world to see that we stand together. You listening? I don't know if you saw it or not, but I did. I saw it live and streaming. And the president, our president, and the president of Israel, or the prime minister of Israel, Netanyahu, said, we stand together. We lock arms together. And any attack against one is an attack against all of us, both of us. Could this have a potential trigger effect to it, do you think? According to the book of Daniel, it will be a trigger. And a consequence of this trigger event will be a weakening of the great lion with eagle's wings, of the great green tree to be cut down, of the gold to turn to silver or aluminum or whatever. You and I and the world, and that's by definition what a real trigger event is. In history, Pearl Harbor was a trigger event. What do we mean by trigger? We mean something has happened that is going to affect the whole world. Okay? We could say World War I and we call it World War I. World War I was not a trigger event. There was a trigger event that brought on World War I with the assassination of Archbishop Ferdinand. But that World War I was not the same as World War II. What happened in World War II was Pearl Harbor. And did Pearl Harbor now affect the whole world? Yeah. Yes. Yes. According to the Bible, whatever this time of the end and trigger effect is going to be beyond anything we have ever seen or comprehended or experienced. There is something about the notable horn, the strengthening of the power from the west. There is something about the breaking of that horn that is going to trigger a whole series of events spiraling downward for the powerful and spiraling upward for the weak. Listening? The bear is going to go up in strength, energy, power. The leopard It's going to go up and up and up. And what about the lion with his eagle's wings? He's going down. In chapter 4 of the book of Daniel, you are this great tree, O king. You're going to be cut down. All of this is going to be far-reaching. It's going to reach all the way down till the time of the end and Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven. That's the definition of a real trigger event. Something that affects everyone on the rock. Threatens everyone on the rock. These are the real trigger events, the prophetic ones. Not the historic ones, the prophetic ones. The New Testament says, now all these things happen to them as examples unto us upon whom the ends of the world are come. You and I are about to not only make history, are part of history, but we are going to see the things foretold by Jesus, by Ellen White, by the prophets. We're going to see these things come to pass as literally or as word for word can produce them. We're going to see them. The question is, what can we do about it? I think that the protection and the help is God's responsibility. What are we supposed to do in view of the events that lie just ahead? Tell me what we're supposed to do. Let's try it this way. At the personal level, what are we supposed to do? We need to spend more time making room for the Holy Spirit to talk to us. Yes or no? Yes. Is there a readiness, is there a preparation that needs to be made in advance of a crisis? And the answer is yes. But the crisis is a spiritual crisis, a spirit crisis. We need to do spiritually whatever we can do with God's help and God's leading and direction to make room for the promise of the Spirit. Now this was acted out 2,000 years ago in the early rain experience, we call it. The Pentecost experience of Acts, the book of Acts. That was a preview. That was a prophetic promise of what is just ahead for us. Spiritually, what should we do or be doing in advance of the promised outpouring of the Holy Spirit? Do you remember what Jesus told the disciples with regards to Pentecost that was on the way? Jesus said, I'm going away, and none of you is asking me where I'm going. Where I'm going, you cannot come. Parentheses, yet. But you have the promise. You have my promise and the promise of the Father that He is going to send you the Comforter, the Spirit. Is that a trigger event? You better believe it's spiritually a trigger event. It's so much a trigger event at the spiritual level that Jesus instructed in the book of Acts to the disciples, don't go out and start preaching yet. Don't go over there and preach. Don't go over there and preach. You wait until you have received, the promise of the Father. That's the outpouring of the Spirit of God promised. Is there prophetic suggestion, mention, that this will happen at a real time, a real calendar time? And the answer is yes. You wait until you receive. And it happened 50 days after the cross, after the resurrection. So what should we be looking for before these events are repeated at the end? Should we wait until we see a flyover, a flyby, and what is the spiritual reality and what can or should we be doing in view of the promise to come? Yes, if the past is a record, if the past has meaning at all, then the church is not going to appreciate many or most of those who are sounding the warning, who are giving the message. The church did not appreciate it when Jesus came. The church is not going to appreciate it. The world is surely not going to appreciate it. So what we should do is fear and tremble and do nothing. What we should do is fear and tremble and hide. What we should do, know we have a calling, we have a work, we have a challenge, we have promises. And if we wait until we receive the promise of the Father, does that guarantee that we're going to live through the final 3.5 years without serious problems at the personal level? People are not really understanding what the Bible is all about. They didn't understand what Jesus was about when he came. They didn't understand the nature of his coming, the nature of his purpose, his promise, his work. They didn't understand why he had to go back to heaven. And yet he says plainly in the Gospels that it's necessary for me to go. The Comforter will not come unless I go. And he went to heaven different than he was bodily here. He was resurrected in a spiritual body, a spirit body. This is New Testament. This is not me. This is New Testament. He was resurrected in a spirit body. John, writing over close to the end of the New Testament, says, "Beloved, does not yet appear what we're going to be, but we know this, when Jesus comes, we're going to be like him, because we're going to see him as he is." He died in a fleshly body, but he was resurrected in a spirit body. You and I are still in the fleshly bodies. We may have to be resurrected. Some of us may live through without tasting death. I find that very difficult to frame, but we don't know. When great events begin to take place in front of us, natural disasters, that's what the brainy people are saying may be right ahead of us. I didn't write that. I didn't say that. In view of the things that are looming on the horizon, the threat of war in the Middle East and beyond, China building up in the South China Sea, building islands, building warships, building jet planes, all of which they stole the blueprints from us. So they built equivalents to us. What do you suppose you and I should be doing? Making time and space, listen, time and space, to be quiet so we can hear the voice of God or the voice of the Spirit. May need to turn the news off. May need to turn the racket down. This because we believe that God is going to pour out his Spirit in added measure and great measure. And so I'm going to earn the Spirit by being good. Is that the way this is working? Is that the way this is supposed to be? No. But if we make choices for God, for truth, for the Spirit, for Christ, if we make choices, does God take note? Does God take note of those who take note of him? And the answer is yes. We don't earn heaven. Only God can earn heaven. And he has earned it according to Revelation chapter 4. And he, in the person of his Son, has earned it in Revelation chapter 5. So there is a cause and effect relationship, because heaven says on the calendar, these things are coming, this time is coming, it's here. And if you and I make choices to strengthen the spirit resolve, the choosing in our own lives, to see what God is asking us to do what God is asking us to do, I really believe we're going to see some trigger events, plural. I believe we're going to see some trigger events very soon now. Oh, people have been saying it for thousands of years. Yes, they have. Which is more reason to believe the time is just ahead of us. I have to lean on the memory that Judy and I and a 2-year-old daughter brought to Chilton County in 1970. I have that memory to put in the memory bank and try to comprehend and understand, how did all of this come about? What was it for? Jim Higgins was back to school at Southern Missionary College with me. We had been together the first time around. Now we're together again at the end. And Jim Higgins heard us having a conversation about finding country property. And we found a place in Tennessee that looked very promising. Judy and I love Tennessee. I'm talking about the climate, the country, everything. And we had an opportunity to buy over 100 acres in Tennessee for $5,000. And we were really considering it. I certainly was. And Jim Higgins jumped into the middle of all of this and he said, no, not till you come to Chilton County and look around. Jim, that's old flat land down there around Montgomery. That's all flat in there. I don't want to live in flat land. We like the hills and the mountains. And he said, it's not flat land in Chilton County? Okay, we'll come. And step by step by step by step, God closed one door and opened another. Closed one door and opened another. Closed one door and opened another. What do I mean, opened a door? Well, I'll tell you this. Old Mr. Benny Martin and his wife Pauline lived in the corner house down here. They had several hundred acres way back in the family when the Indians were shipped away to Oklahoma. And the Martin family are the first white people, first Americans, if you want to say that, who were granted the Indian land. So when we got here, I rode up and down this road out here, which was not a road, it was a mud trail. Believe me when I say mud, a mud trail. And so I said, Mr. Benny, is this your land? Yes. Is this corner yours? Yes. How far does it go that way? Another quarter of a mile. How far does it go that way? 3/4 of a mile. Mr. Benny, would you ever consider selling it? Well, yeah. We actually tried to sell it, and no one was interested. And so we just didn't think about it anymore. And so we bought 172 acres from Benny Martin and his dear wife. Are you ready for this? For $200 an acre. We built a home over here, 100 acres away. We built a home there. And the idea was that for 3 years we would make a monthly payment to Mr. and Ms. Martin. And at the end of 3 years, at the end of 36 months, are you listening? At the end of 36 months, we would pay the balance of whatever it is. And it was close to $30,000, as I recall. Doesn't matter. It was a bunch of money that we didn't have. So Judy and I wrestled with what we were going to do, and we wrestled with the Lord. What are we going to do? Put the house up for sale with some acreage. And we did, and someone said immediately, we want it, and this is what we'll offer. And the offering was wonderful, but it wasn't enough to pay Mr. Martin's balance. And the contract said, balance in full, 36 months. You listening? And these people said, we want it. We make an offer of thus and so. And then when the time came to make the rest of the contract, they backed out. Lord, what shall we do? I can remember distinctly praying out loud, Lord, what shall we do? Advertise the house again and raise the price, which we did, and it was exactly what was needed to pay the Martins. Are you listening? Now, of course, that was just happenstance. That was just a fluke. That was just no. God has been doing something with this piece of real estate for a long time. I have every reason to believe that God saved it for me and my family and for His cause and His work. I have every reason to believe that. And here we are, from 1970 until now. How many years is that? 30 and 19. I have every reason to believe that we are still here, and this little humble ministry is here because God has a work yet to be accomplished, yet to be done. I have every reason to believe that. And I'm watching, I am waiting. In January, how old did I turn? 76 or 77. I ain't no spring chicken anymore. I hiked over every square inch and foot of this property. I knew every hill. I knew where every spring was. I knew where every bee tree was. I knew. Now I don't even know my name hardly. But the work has to go on. The work is larger than any one of us or all of us. The work has to go on. And the work is exactly what God spoke and told me to do. Start a publishing ministry. Print the books. Make them attractive. Scatter them like the leaves of autumn. Those were the words. Scatter them like the leaves of autumn. And so we've been doing that for a long time. No, God has been doing that for a long, long time. And every one of you and every one of us is a part of it. Sometimes I look at the pictures hanging on the mantelpiece or at the house, and I go by and I look, and that's me in the picture. Hardly recognizable, because I was never that young. Never. Well, it has been exciting, and the excitement is not over yet. I'm just telling you, there are things being said and things being done that have to happen. They will. They are in the process of happening. And what it's going to mean, only heaven knows, and only heaven can work it out. I'm here because of something God did, and my wife is here. My family came here because of something God did. And the same is true with every one of you, every one of us. God has some purpose and plan ahead for all of us. So one more. They came out of Florida, husband, wife, as I recall, 3 children. Might have been 4, but it doesn't matter. They came out of Florida and they said, we want to do missionary work. We've been canvassing. We don't have enough money to buy books. If you would loan us some books, we'll sell them and come and buy more. We did, and they did, and everything was wonderful, but shortly thereafter, 3 hurricanes in a row hit South Florida, where they were. Thousands of small craft boats were sunk, tied up at the docks, the whatever. Thousands of them were sunk. And the appeal went out over the news. If you have diving experience and resurrecting sunken craft, we want you now. And this young man, he was a young man at the time, this young man had experience in exactly that. So there was a promise that he was going to be paid for every craft he refloated. But before that, they were in straight hard times, straight place. They had no money. They had no food. They had no bed to sleep in. And so they stopped. It was 9 to 10 o'clock at night. They stopped on the side of the road and they prayed. The family prayed, God, we're here for you. You know our need. That's all we can say is, you know our need. Well, by and by, the oldest son, who was 18, 19, whatever, said, I need a restroom, Dad. Get a restroom. So they went to a service station and a restroom. The young man went in. And he came out of the restroom dancing. It must have been a sight. He came out dancing. If you haven't heard this story, it's a true story. He's using the restroom, and so when he pulls the toilet tissue, out falls a $20 bill. And he pulls a little more tissue and another $20 bill falls out. And he pulls a little more and another $20 bill falls out. I don't remember, Judy, was it 5 or 6? A couple of $100, $20 bills, whatever. They went, got a motel, got food. Don't ask me if I believe in miracles. I told them, I said, I've heard all kinds of tales, but I've never heard of toilet tissue. Answers to prayer. Yes. No. Every picture on the wall is a miracle. Every one. Every book that they represent are miracles. So Jesus has come almost to the end of his ministry. He says, greater things than these you're going to see. I believe it. I believe greater things are just ahead. But I believe the greater things, once we see the evidence of them, are a triggering event. And I believe that when we begin to spread millions and millions of publications very quickly to every home in every state, I believe we're going to stir up the devil and his bunch. The devil and his bunch. Look, take this with you here. Read it 2 or 3 times just to get the picture in your thinking. And let's see what it means when it says our planet is changing. Very dark days are ahead for all of us. Father in heaven, we believe the end is near, even at the doors. But your people have been believing for centuries, for millennia. So who are we? If we run out of earthly time, so be it. But there is heavenly time. There's a heavenly clock. There's an accounting with heaven. And I believe with all my heart and all my mind and all the things that we have seen and experienced in the last 40, 50 years here in this humble ministry, I believe that they have made ready, made a way, provided experience so that we can do the large work, the finished work. Please bless. You have and you will, because you have promised in Jesus' name. Amen and amen.